Blog viewers. Today, I spent a lot of time on my last post on the end of the last August post, and I thought it was a very important subject to discuss, and so I spent a lot of time, and more importantly, I spent a lot of emotional energy on the issue, and I think that was a good decision. Today's video post, we will discuss and provide more commentary on this category of the neutral. Now we have the bad, in terms of human experiences, the bad, the neutral, and the good. And I think this is something that I sort of started exploring in maybe about 6-7 months ago, but then really started to focus on the neutral as a category of human experience. It's an interesting way to frame things, especially focusing on the neutral, because the neutral is, I think, has not gotten enough either philosophical or just general discussion of what it means to be neutral, something to be neutral. Good and bad have certainly been discussed and debated, but the neutral, I think, needs a little bit more careful attention of what makes an experience neutral and how common is it to have an experience that's neutral. So, to summarize, we have the the bad, the neutral, and the good. Bad, neutral, good. And these are the only kinds of human experiences you can ever have. That's it. One of those three. And of course, specific human environments generally produce the corresponding type of experience. So a bad environment will regularly, predictably, almost without exception, produce the bad. A neutral environment will again regularly, consistently, almost without exception, produce the neutral. And a good environment regularly, consistently, almost without exception, produces the good. So that's sort of the dominant setup we have. And so to get more into this topic, I started thinking about how you can sort of get into this more. And one easy way to do it is just to do an experiment, which I sort of did the other day, and is to scan while you're driving. Scan almost any decent-sized town or city. It doesn't really matter where it is. I believe globalization and the rise of big corporations that establish the same branch pretty much everywhere with the same procedures is making most cities and most towns largely similar. Not identical, but largely similar, except for climate and other natural features of the environment. But scan almost any city, and I think you will find 5 categories of human structures. Buildings, basically. First category, you'll see tons of restaurants, groceries, gas stations, bars, and convenience stores. Restaurants, groceries, gas stations, bars, convenience stores. Places to take care of basic day-to-day needs. You'll also find tons of gyms, hospitals, schools, and medical health offices. So again, those are a little bit, they're still kind of everyday needs, but maybe a little bit more related to health and obviously education. Then I think you will find a third category of retail shops, from the very smallest one, owner place, to the very largest, such as Target and Best Buy and all the rest. You'll find a fourth category, which will be sort of corporate office towers, places where office workers work, and residential homes, of course, will be the fifth category. So that's pretty much it. In almost any town, you'll find those 5 categories of structures. So let's say you live in such a town that has largely these 5 categories of structures, and it's about right around now, which is around 6 p.m. And you're not hungry, you just ate, you're not sick, you're a relatively healthy person. You've long since gotten your high school and college degrees. Your car doesn't need any gas or any oil change or anything. You don't need anything from a convenience store right away. You don't want to go to a bar and drink. And you've got all the food and clothes you need at home. So if that is your setup, so you're basically satisfied in terms of your daily and everyday living needs and on almost every point. So if that is your basic setup, if that's how you are at, let's say, 6 p.m., what can the city or town offer you at that point? Because at this point, you're at a point where you don't really need the essentials of life. So you're in search of the good. You want to go out in the city in search of the good, because you've already got everything you need to live, to get by. You already have your car filled with gas. You don't need to go to a gas station. You don't need to get a drink. You're not hungry. You're not. You don't need pharmacies. You don't need any of that stuff. So you don't need stuff. You want to go out there and experience the good. And so, what can this city that we just went through, this city with these 5 categories of structures, what can this city offer you in terms of the good? And I think you have to be careful here. My answer is first very little, but I want to get into it before. So don't think that's the end of the issue right there. But I'd say very little, but with a caveat. So why? Well, the city, again, specializes in providing neutral goods and experiences of neutral value. Most cities and towns are good at that nowadays. They provide neutral goods and experiences of neutral value to everyone, hopefully on a non-discriminatory basis as to one's race or gender or whatever, religion. And I think most cities are good at doing that. Most cities are good at gathering and supplying to the residents goods of neutral value and experiences of neutral value. So, but what does it mean, though? So here's sort of the key point. What does it mean for an experience to be of neutral value or a good to be of neutral value? I don't think there's a simple definition, like in 10 words, that you can just run with. But I think there's a lot of common characteristics to neutral experiences. First, obtaining this good or experience is generally, when you're more sober about it and sane and you've maybe a little bit more maturity in you, it's just not worth getting too excited about. You go to the gas station, you pump some gas in your car. Okay, it would be bad if you didn't have the gas because you'd be stranded. But big deal. So you now have some gas to drive somewhere. Whoop-de-doo. Let's say you live in a terribly boring, lonely town. What good would it do to have all this gas to drive all over a town that's basically pretty crappy or boring or lonely, whatever? It's not really going to do you much good. That's one characteristic of the neutral. Just when you really look at it in a moment of careful reflection and sobriety, it's just not worth getting excited about. Second, the good or experience has little to change your behavior or thoughts either one way or the other. It just keeps you where you are, sort of stagnant. So going to a bar or restaurant is a very good example of this. You take care of sort of the body's needs, body's deficiency of nutrients and needs calories, energy to keep burning and keep you going, but nothing else really changes in your behavior or thoughts or anything like that. It just keeps you going. So that would be the second characteristic. The third would be obtaining the good or obtaining this neutral good or experience sheds absolutely zero insight on your identity or the questions and concerns that are most important for you in your specific situation to identify and resolve and answer on an existential level. What do I mean by that? Well, let me give you an example. So most jobs in the city, so one of the categories we had was corporate office towers in the city. So most jobs in any city you could get. You could go and get these jobs, and you would do basically some repetitive, non-fun work, which bears almost no relationship to your core identity or your deepest sort of existential challenges. No relationship. You would get paid some money to do that work, and you then repeat the same cycle next week, next month, next year, maybe even the next decade. This thing generates income to, again, help with your basic survival needs. You're not killed by doing this job. So it's hard to say that this is very bad, but it's also very, very far removed from the good. So, again, because it's not shedding this activity, it's not shedding any real insight on your identity, who you are, giving you self-knowledge. It's not answering or shedding light on the questions and concerns that are most important for you to figure out, for your life to improve, for your life to have meaning, for your life to be worth living. on a very deep level, for your life to be worth celebrating by yourself and perhaps even by others. It's not going to do that, therefore it's in the neutral. So in an average town or city, you have, I would say, about 100 possible human structures, excluding the homes of other people. Very few of these 100 structures are very bad. Perhaps the example would be like a gun store. But almost all of these reside in the neutral. In any town, 90 to 95% of places you go would be either bad, very few would be bad, but most would be in the neutral. But the problem here is, as I've stressed in one of the other posts, is that there's no connection between the bad or neutral and the good. So these are totally distinct. So the problem is you can't get from the bad or neutral to the good. I was thinking of this example. Well, you could say, well, what about if you were at a restaurant and you had a really meaningful conversation with someone and it shed a lot of light on your identity and stuff? Wouldn't that be going from the neutral to the good? I would say that experience, it's really not that the experience wasn't that you went to the restaurant. The experience was that you had a very deep conversation at a restaurant. So I think it's not just semantics. It's the nature and the dominant quality of the experience was not that you went to a restaurant. It was that you opened up to another person and had that conversation. So I would say that's not a bridge between the neutral and the good. That's just an example of the good. So thankfully, if there's 95% in either bad or neutral, there's 5% that are still in any town that can lead to the good. And so these places, the first point to mention is these structures that can lead to the good are very few and far between. And because of that, they're very special. And almost all of them can not only lead to the good, but they can lead to infinite good. So a library or a bookstore, for example, you can hardly quantify how much good can be produced from going to a library or bookstore in the right spirit, seeking to learn things that will improve your behavior and your life at the deepest level. You could read a book in there that causes you to totally give up and abandon racist attitudes, or cause you to really reorient your life away from an empty life of consumer, commodity, fetishism, many other examples. That could be, again, a structure. This would be the library or bookstore that could lead to infinite good. Another example, there could be a place in this town, hard to say exactly what kind of place it would be. Perhaps maybe, think about a building containing the city's best psychotherapists. Now, as a man, to continue the example of psychotherapy, as a man in today's society, you're generally allowed to, I say this, again, generally, there are regional variations, but generally, men today in this society, and in probably others of like quality in the West, there are really only two emotions that men can publicly express, that it's okay to express. One of these is anger or rage of sort of a non-violent form. That is acceptable for a man to be angry, to be even enraged. That is an acceptable emotion to express on the part of a man. The other emotion that is acceptable to be expressed is some sort of pride or elation or joy from competitively dominating another human being, or in accomplishing some very difficult task. So, for example, when you win the Super Bowl or NBA title, you're allowed to, just go crazy and scream up and down and be very proud and put your chest out and all that stuff. That's an emotion you can express as a man. But outside of that, outside of rage and anger, most other emotions are not allowed, are not encouraged to be expressed. Men don't express those emotions in public. Because why? Because those emotions are considered unmanly. The programming, we've been talking about the social programming. The social programming is such that if you step out as a man from rage and anger, and also from pride, elation, or joy from competitively dominating other people, the emotion is viewed as unmanly. And so most men do not express those emotions. So within psychotherapy, within a place that has, for example, some of the best psychotherapists in town, as a man you would be allowed to go into that environment and explore for probably the first time in years, face to face with another human being, a whole wide range of emotions that are not captured within rage and pride. And that would be good. That would be perhaps infinitely good for you, depending on your level of emotional makeup at that point. So again, this would be this building containing this excellent psychotherapist. Another example of a building that not common in town, but very special, very unique, can lead to infinite good. So to summarize, there are 3 types of places in any town you could go to. Places where you will experience the bad. These places are few and far between, but the consequences of going to these places can be very tragic and fatal. So these are like the worst places to go. They're very few and far between, though, so most people don't end up in these places. Then there's the places where you will experience the neutral. This is very, very common. Almost everywhere is like this. 80 to 90%. You go and you experience the neutral. The consequences of going to these types of neutral places are that you will remain generally fixed or stagnant in whatever form of life you're leading at that point, or have led for many years. Nothing horrible will really happen to you, nothing tragic or fatal most of the time, but nothing terribly wonderful is going to happen either. Then there are, like I said, those last category, very rare, places where you will experience the good. Very uncommon in any town, maybe 5%, but these places can allow you to grow, develop, and mature as a person as much as you are able to. Could be infinite, could be non-infinite, but the only thing really limiting you is your own initiative and willpower to implement what you learn and experience in those good places. So I hope this provided some clarification on the neutral, and we'll be back soon and talk about some other things. Bye-bye.